How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I've got another vinyl collection video for y'all. Last week I showed y'all my country music vinyl collection, which is mostly country albums from the 1980s and very early 1990s. Today we're going through my heavy metal records. I started collecting heavy metal albums on vinyl around 2010 or so, and I stopped pretty quickly. I talked about this more in depth in a video I posted over a week ago about why I think cassettes are the best physical music format. I stopped collecting vinyl pretty soon after I started. I only collected vinyl for maybe a couple of years because heavy metal vinyl is just very expensive. I think that heavy metal artists are definitely more keen on reissuing their albums on vinyl rather than country artists who mainly just, put their albums up on digital or continue selling CDs. But classic metal acts still routinely reissue their albums on vinyl, which is cool, but the issue is they're very expensive, and with how heavy vinyl is nowadays and how marked up it is due to it being trendy, it's just very expensive to collect heavy metal vinyl records. So I stopped after a pretty short amount of time, but I still have a few good records that I want to show y'all, and so we're gonna jump into that. First up is a classic thrash album, Anthrax's Among the Living. I'm pretty sure this is a reissue. Yeah, this is a reissue. It says 2012 on the back, so this is a 2012 reissue. I think this is probably, that was probably the 25th anniversary, so I guess this is the 25th anniversary reissue of Among the Living, classic album cover. And of course, this is pretty much the best known Anthrax album. Personally, I'm more of a fan of Spreading the Disease, their 1985 album that preceded this. I think that's their best album, but this one's got Caught in a Mosh, Indians, all pretty much the most famous Anthrax tracks on this album. So this one's very well known. I actually don't think I've ever played this copy. I think this is one of the last heavy metal records I ever bought, so I'm not sure if this has even been played yet, but yeah, this is a great record. This is prime Anthrax. Anthrax is always cool. And they definitely had a unique style. I think a lot of people like to knock on Anthrax more than any other band that's in the big four, because they probably have the weakest, least consistent discography, and they're technically not even that much more famous than, say, Testament was back in the day. And while I definitely agree, if any band would replace Anthrax in the big four, I definitely think it should be Testament, but Anthrax had a really cool, sort of unique, I guess even punk rock influenced style, and they always had really good riffs. I think Scott Ian, was the main riff writer, and they always just had super punchy, just very recognizable riffs. You can tell a song is an Anthrax song even before the vocals come in. Next up, we've got another classic thrash metal album from the late 1980s, and not only is this a reissue, it is a remaster. Megadeth, So Far, So Good, So What. I love this album. I think it's probably the most underrated Megadeth album, let's be real. And the reason why I sort of said it's the remaster regretfully is because, as anyone knows, the 2004 Megadeth remasters where Dave Mustaine, came out of retirement after his, freak injury to his wrist. He came in and just literally remixed the crap out of all the albums. And of all the albums that really got a butcher job, this is number one. I own the original mix of So Far So Good So What on cassette, and that's a pro tip for y'all. If you find a Megadeth album on cassette, it is the original mix, it is the original version, because Megadeth has never reissued their albums on cassette. And so the reason why I think So Far So Good So What really got butchered the most in the remasters is because this was their most 80s sounding album. This album, the original mix, is totally drenched in reverb, there's so much delay, and Dave's vocal tone is so snarly, but I love it. It's very atmospheric, and personally, I think Set the World Afire is the best Megadeth song. That's on here, and of course, you got In My Darkest Hour, which is just iconic. Hook and Mouth is also incredible. This is just a very, very good album, solid thrash metal album. Probably the reason why it is so underrated is because it came after Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, and preceded Rust in Peace, which are, regarded as two of the best thrash metal albums of all time. So it had the unfortunate fate of being released in between those. And also, it is a very short album. It has 8 tracks, but Into the Lungs of Hell is just an intro. So really, there's only 7 full, fleshed out songs on here. So it's very short, and so for that reason, it's kind of buried, but I think this is one of Megadeth's best albums. Alright, next up, we got another Megadeth album, which I already just mentioned, Rust in Peace. And the cool thing is, I actually think that this might be an original, or at least a reissue that was released before the remasters, because I've listened to this record several times, and I don't remember it sounding like the remaster. Rust in Peace was definitely also butchered in the 2004 remasters because apparently for certain songs like Take No Prisoners and Five Magics, the original vocal tracks were lost, like they couldn't find them, so Dave Mustaine had to go and re-record the vocals, and like you just can't reproduce the magic of an album like Rust in Peace and do it again 15 years later. But I mean, this album is just so good. I mean, it has a reputation, it has for a reason. Holy Wars, Hangar 18, Take No Prisoners, Lucretia. I mean, this album is just stacked with incredible riffs, incredible songwriting, Tornado of Souls as well. I mean, this is, you know, this is sort of Megadeth at the apex of their powers. And so yeah, I think this is actually an original mix of Rust in Peace on vinyl. I should play it again just to make sure, but I think this is an original. And now we're moving on to Megadeth's arch rival, Metallica's And Justice for All. Of course, this is a giant album. It's got 2 LPs. This is back before every artist put out their albums on 2 LPs. This came out in 1988. I mean, what can you say about And Justice for All that hasn't been said already? I think this is Metallica's best album. Blackened, And Justice for All, the title track, One, Frayed Ends of Sanity, the most underrated Metallica song, Dyer's Eve, their most savage, thrashiest song, their most brutal song. I mean, this album is so good. The only drawback to this album, in my opinion, is the bass. As everyone knows, this album is notorious for having a very, very, very thin low end, and I've personally remixed some of the songs on my channel as well. Jason Newsted's bass tracks have been, of course, uncovered in recent years because of the Guitar Hero Metallica game that came out in like 2008 or 2009, and his bass playing on this album was incredible, and it really is too bad that it was just, you know, buried because, you know, Lars and James wanted a certain sound. In my opinion, if the album had been mixed properly, you know, like how I want it, this would probably be the greatest heavy metal album of all time, and I really do mean that. I mean, the riffs on this album are ridiculous, so heavy, and really I think this was Metallica at the apex of their powers, both in terms of songwriting and just in terms of their general energy. Yeah, this is just an incredible album. Alright, now I'm really, really proud to have this one in my collection. This is Judas Priest's British Steel, and this is an original. This is absolutely an original. You can sort of tell just by the back cover and sort of how thin it is. You know, when an album is reissued on vinyl, they've got all sorts of like deluxe gatefold sleeves and stuff, but this is definitely an original copy of Judas Priest's British Steel, and I think that when I got this album, it was sort of the perfect situation to show how vinyl buying is so bad now. This only cost me 16 bucks. You know, the fact that, and I think this, and it was a new condition as well. It was a brand new, never been opened, original copy of one of the most iconic metal albums of all time. It was only 16 bucks, but you know, you get Metallica reissued on, you know, vinyl, you know, And Justice for All or Master of Puppets, and it's like 30 or 40 bucks. Like, why is new vinyl this expensive? But I mean, yeah, I mean, Breaking the Law, Rapid Fire, Metal Gods, even the more underrated tracks like Don't Have to Be Old to Be Wise, Steeler. I mean, dude, this album is just killer. Judas Priest, in my opinion, is like the ultimate prototypical metal band. If someone were to say, what is heavy metal supposed to sound like, you give them the classic Judas Priest albums. Of course, British Steel is one of those. Moving on to yet another influential, important British heavy metal band, we've got Iron Maiden, Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. The only Iron Maiden album I own on vinyl. And, you know, again, it's so funny because when you look at, you know, the late 1980s, I guess that's when everyone was really trying to be progressive, because you had Metallica's And Justice for All, and you had Iron Maiden's Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, which is definitely their most ambitious sort of foray into prog rock at that time. Of course, you know, once you get to the 2000s, post Brave New World, Iron Maiden era, you know, every song on their albums is like 7 minutes long now, and everything they do is prog rock. But this was a very ambitious album for Iron Maiden, kind of building off the sound that they had experimented with on Somewhere in Time, which is my favorite Iron Maiden album. Somewhere in Time is their masterpiece in my opinion. And you know, you get some good stuff on here, like Infinite Dreams is awesome, and of course you have sort of a mix of poppier stuff too. You've got Can I Play With Madness and The Evil That Men Do. The Clairvoyant is my favorite track on here, and then you have the ambitious title track. So this is a cool album. Definitely kind of had a unique production style to it. A lot of people kind of think it sounds hollow, and you know, I think that's true. They definitely were going for a very reverberated guitar tone on here. But overall, this is a very cool album, and of course, you know, with Iron Maiden, you get the amazing album artwork. Let's continue down sort of the more traditional heavy metal route. We've got Manowar's Battle Hymns, and this is a reissue, as you can see. I see on here it's got the Back on Black logo, which is sort of like, I guess they were like a label or something that really was sort of spearheading the re-release sort of trend. And if I remember correctly, this is on like gray vinyl, you know, for like extra metal. Like it's on granite gray vinyl. This was released in 2010. The reissue was released in 2010. This original album came out in 1982, and this is sort of Manowar before they got extra corny. The title track on here is definitely sort of like the power metal sort of epic, you know, story of, you know, conquering and stuff like that. But you got some more traditional stuff on here, like Deathtone and Metal Days, sort of just more traditional heavy metal. You know, this is the early 80s before, you know, things got super ambitious for metal bands. But this is cool, man. I mean, Joey DeMaio is one of the most underrated bass players ever. I mean, of course, Manowar, you get into stuff like Fighting the World and Kings of Metal. That's what they're more known for. But this is a pretty good release. If you're interested in Manowar, definitely check this one out. And then we got probably the most interesting one I have. This is Saint Vitus, Born Too Late. And so some of you may have never heard of Saint Vitus. They are a doom metal band, and this actually might be an original as well, because I don't even see a, you know, re-release date on here. This is 1986, which is the original date of the album. I mean, you can see the back. There's no reissue or anything on there, so this could be original. Basically, I'll just say, like, if you're a fan of Black Sabbath, you're gonna love this. I mean, so doom metal is just very sludgy, low production value, but I mean, you can hear the Black Sabbath influence all over this one. So if you're into Black Sabbath, definitely check them out. But I mean, I haven't listened to this album in a long time. Title track is pretty good. So now let's get into the heavier stuff. So this is one of my favorite albums of all time, Leprosy by Death. Gosh, this is an incredible album. This is also a reissue. I think this is like cherry red vinyl or something like that. And again, this one was so expensive. This was like 30 bucks. Like, why? But I mean, you know, I will say, definitely worth 30 bucks. I mean, you gotta kind of get the cool like pictures in here and stuff. I mean, this is like death metal at its peak, in my opinion. You've got like Pull the Plug, you got the title track, you've got Born Dead, Open Casket. It's such a brutal album. And of course, like the classic Ed Repka album cover. He's got some of the greatest album covers in music history, in my opinion. This is one of the most iconic. He also did Megadeth's Rust in Peace. And yeah, this album is just so brutal. It's definitely not as progressive as Death would get with their later releases, but I mean, I just love this because, again, you know, 1988, peak sort of 80s production values. It's so like dark, and there's just so much echo, and there's reverb, and it's just so brutal. It's just this is just a great album in my opinion. This is probably the most rare album I have in my collection as far as like collector's value. It is Dark Angel's Live Scars, and so this is a live album by the thrash metal band Dark Angel from their Leave Scars album. I think Leave Scars came out in 1989. That was like their, I think it was their third album actually. And so they're on tour. This is a reissue, I think 2010, and they're mainly performing songs off that album. But Dark Angel is a band that if you're into thrash metal at all and you've never heard of them, you need to check them out. They're most known for their 1986 album Darkness Descends, and that's one of those albums where if you're not in the heavy metal community, you've probably never heard of it, but if you're in the metal community, like, that's a legendary album for the right reasons. I mean, if you think Slayer is brutal and stuff like that, you need to check out Dark Angel, because Dark Angel, like, that album Darkness Descends, blows everything out of the freaking water. It is so fast and brutal and heavy, and I mean, this is one of those bands that, you know, probably potentially could have been something, but you know, by the time you get to the late 1980s, bands like Metallica and Megadeth and Testament are starting to cross over. And this band, of course, you know, as brutal and heavy as they were, they didn't have as much commercial crossover appeal. But they're still around, I think. All right, so now we're going to get into an interesting part of the video, which I call albums I don't listen to anymore. So for those of you who don't know me from Twitter or anything like that, or don't know me personally, I did grow up religious, and for a while, I wouldn't say like I left Christianity or anything, but I did have a period of years where like I just didn't care very much. And you know, when I got into heavy metal, of course, everybody's into like the faux devil worship stuff, so I kind of got into that too, and I would like drop pentagrams on my notebooks and stuff like that because I was such a bad, evil kid. And you know, after a while, I just kind of like I grew out of it. And I just a few years later, like, actually began to, you know, take Christianity seriously. And so for that reason, and I'm not trying to, lecture anyone on religion or anything, but I just want to let you know, like, when I say I don't listen to these albums anymore, I actually mean it. Mainly because, I'm not worried about, like, the music possessing me or anything, or like the PMRC did back in the 1980s, but definitely just sort of, in a way, like, I can't, in good Christian conscience, like, entertain these albums, if that makes sense. Like, I can't just throw them on and have them playing in the background, like, oh yeah, I'm fine with these lyrics, like, because they're not really compatible with my religious views. Again, not like saying I'm gonna burn these records or anything, or I'm gonna, condemn these bands. But that's basically what I mean when I say I don't listen to these anymore. Right, so first off, we got the band that I first fell in love with, that first got me into heavy metal in the first place. Way back in the Guitar Hero days, I heard Raining Blood on Guitar Hero 3 when my cousin was playing it, and after that I was hooked as a heavy metal fan. We've got Slayer, and this is their debut album, Show No Mercy, of course. Like, you got that really corny album cover with the Baphomet with the sword and the pentagram and the blood dripping out of it. It was so heavy. But this is a reissue, as you can tell by the back cover. This is re-released on Metal Blade, like, years. I think actually it says 2008, so I think this is the 25th anniversary reissue of Slayer's Show No Mercy. And, definitely Slayer at their most primitive, not nearly as brutal and as fast as they would become, but there are some good songs on here, man. This is definitely when Slayer was more into traditional heavy metal. I mean, you've got stuff like Tormentor on here, which of course is like totally unlike anything else they recorded afterwards. Metal Storm, Face of Slayer, Black Magic is like, one of the first Slayer songs I knew on guitar. The title track is good. And so definitely, one of those albums that you look back on and kind of laugh as to how primitive it was, but very important. I mean, this came out the same year as Metallica's Kill 'Em All. As far as foundational albums building thrash metal as a genre, this is one of the most important albums in metal history. Next, we've got their EP, which came out afterwards in 1984, Haunting the Chapel. Only 4 songs, reissue. This one's really falling apart too. The record's coming out of the sleeve. Again, reissue, same year. They got really, really bad graphics on the back. Look at that font, it's so ugly. I think the gimmick for these reissues was like there was like blood splatter vinyl. So I think this album is actually translucent, and it's got like the blood splatter. So it's it's got like some red blotches on it. This is most known for having Chemical Warfare on it. That's the big popular song. My favorite track on here though is Aggressive Perfector, and this is the original version. I think that's Slayer's best song, and some people would look at that and say, well, like, that sounds nothing like Slayer or whatever. I think that's their best one because it's like the most traditional, like, sort of power metal almost style song. I think that's their best song. You can feel free to disagree with me, but I think that's like the best encapsulation of Slayer sound pre Rain and Blood, which of course is their big landmark album. Alright, then we've got what some Slayer fans who want to be contrarian and don't want to talk about Rain and Blood consider to be their best release, their magnum opus, Hell Awaits. And I definitely think that production-wise, this is their most interesting album because it really does sound like it was recorded in the middle of a cave. I mean, the booming drums on the title track are crazy. At Dawn They Sleep is a really dark one. Crypts of Eternity is a really dark one too. Definitely an interesting album. Sort of shows, a different avenue that they might have taken had they not gone with Rain and Blood, because Rain and Blood, of course, was such a landmark album because it was so fast and like a short album too. Most songs on the album were under 3 minutes. This shows Slayer going in like a sort of really, really dark, progressive metal direction where a lot of these songs are very long. There's only 7 songs on here. And yeah, it definitely just shows a different avenue that they might have taken. So then we've got another one, and of course this album cover just shows you why I don't listen to it anymore. We've got Mercyful Fate's Don't Break the Oath, and this is a reissue, reissued in, I think it says 1997, and it's got a bonus track on the back that was on the original album. But of course, if you know about King Diamond and Mercyful Fate, you know why they were so influential for both thrash metal and black metal. I mean, yeah, that this album is pretty pseudo-satanic. In fact, King Diamond might have actually been a devil worshipper at one point, I don't know. But yeah, definitely, even back when I was in my rebellious days, I listened to the title track and like the first part where like the dark prayer was going on or whatever. Even back then, when I was an edgy teenager, I was like, I don't know if I should be listening to this stuff. I mean, definitely very, very dark, definitely lots of demonic references on here. But I mean, they always had such a cool sound, and especially with King Diamond's records once he went solo. Abigail is really incredible production-wise and just sound-wise too. He had Andy LaRocque on guitar too, and he added so much. And then, yeah, I mean, there's some tracks on here that are cool. Welcome Princess of Hell is one I always like. A Dangerous Meeting is the first track on here. That one was always pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely like the epitome of, you know, an album I just can't listen to anymore. So all that out of the way, we're going to end the full album section with some good old Christian entertainment. We've got Stripers to Hell with the Devil. This is the only hair metal album I own on vinyl, and I picked it up because this is only like $3 at my local record store. I bought this used, and of course, you know, you've got the back cover. Full-on 1980s glam metal, but there's some rockin' stuff on here, man. Don't let their look fool you. And of course, I'm just gonna show sort of the pictures on the inner sleeve. Don't let their look fool you, man. Stryper could kick it with the best, and of course, Michael Sweet is an incredible vocalist, but he and Oz Fox was their other lead guitar player. They had some of the greatest dual guitar leads of the 80s that rivaled even Iron Maiden and Judas Priest, in my opinion. I mean, of course, they're most known for Calling on You and Honestly, which are like, you know, sort of their popular songs. Honestly was a big hit ballad on MTV. But there's some heavy songs on here, man. Rockin' the World and the More Than a Man. Like, if you're a Christian, dude, More Than a Man is a song that needs to be in your playlist. It's such an awesome, like, Christian metal song. Straight up metal, too, not even glam metal. Like, that's just a hard rockin' metal song. And, you know, as far as Christian music goes, this is one of the most important albums in Christian music history. Of course, this came out in 1986. And, you know, heavy metal in the 80s was not, you know, friendly towards Christians. And of course, Christians didn't like heavy metal. But this album went platinum back in 1986, when heavy metal was still definitely experimenting and growing. And so this is definitely a breakthrough album for Christian rock. And so you could say without Stryper breaking through, I mean, Christian rock would not be an institution like it is today. So we're going to end this video with a few more 45s that I have. I just found these. First, we've got Dirty Rotten Imbeciles, Violent Pacification. This is an EP. I think this came out in like 83 or 84, something like that. This is a reissue. It's on orange vinyl. This one is just funny. DRI was one of the bands that really perfected sort of crossover thrash late in the 1980s, but this is definitely like a straight up punk record in my opinion. And then we've got two Iron Maiden 45s. Here's Twilight Zone and here's Purgatory. Both are singles from the Killers album, 1981, one of Iron Maiden's best albums in my opinion. And this is during a period, I think 2014 or 2015, when Iron Maiden was re-releasing a bunch of their stuff on vinyl. They re-released a ton of their singles and just sort of, you know, the same original packaging. And these were pretty cool. I mean, I think they were only like $5 a piece. They had them from all the 80s albums basically, and so I just got them from the Killers album because that's one of my favorite albums. Definitely, you know, kind of cheesy, you know, satanic artwork on here on Purgatory. This is a pretty good song though. And the B-sides are really good too. I mean, Twilight Zone was originally not included, but you've got Wrathchild on the B-side, and that's, you know, such a great song. And then Purgatory has Genghis Khan on the other side. That's one of Iron Maiden's best instrumentals, so definitely cool 45s to have in my collection. Alright y'all, so that's all. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you haven't checked out my country vinyl video from the last upload, definitely check that out. If you are also a vinyl collector, let me know what some of your favorite heavy metal albums are, if you own any. And thanks for watching, guys.